This is Primetime America. I'm Greg Wheatley. One of the clear injunctions in Scripture is for God's people to take care of those who are weak and relatively helpless. That includes people like orphans, those without parents, and widows. And in front of me today, and someone I'm going to introduce you to, is someone who takes that command by Jesus very, very seriously. John Bentley is with us. John is the co-founder of Harmony Outreach and makes his home in Beijing, China. And we're going to find out why and what that's all about here in the next few minutes. John, welcome to Primetime.
Thank you, Greg.
You were telling me before we turned on the microphones today about the scope of what you do, and it really kind of covers a big gamut of things. What are some of those?
Well, we have 6 different outreaches in China right now. We have an orphan home just south of Beijing, which we call Harmony House. We support a Christian deaf school in Henan Province in the city of Kaifeng, support an underground seminary in Shanxi Province, an orphanage, for Chinese-run Christian orphanage in northern Shanxi Province for teenage orphans. We do a lot of heart surgeries and surgeries for poor people and minority groups in Qinghai Province. And then we support an underground seminary.
Wow. And in your spare time, right?
Yeah, right.
Now, how did you come to this? I happen to know a little bit of this story, so I'm kind of leading the witness here. But it's a fascinating story about how you got where you are.
Well, it was really the Lord that chose it for me. The prophet Jeremiah said, Jeremiah 10:23, "For I know, O Lord, that a man's life is not his own. It is not for man to direct his steps." And so it was with me. I'm actually an attorney, licensed and practicing in Washington State and Oregon, and God called me to come to China.
And what did that call feel like? I mean, here you are having a pretty nice life, thank you very much, I assume. What did that look like?
Well, one thing, brother, is when the Lord calls you, a lot of times He doesn't give you the whole plan. He gives you just the next step. Yeah. And if you read biographies of some of the most famous missionaries, there's that common denominator that most of them knew that they were called. They didn't know what would happen when they got there or what exactly they were going to be doing. And so it was for us. I felt the Lord very clearly call me to China, and then He began to confirm that call through events. It was not really clear to me what He was going to do with that. In fact, we went through law school completely on faith. We just believed if God was guiding, He would provide for our needs. So we went with the determination we wouldn't take out student loans at all, just trust the Lord to provide manna from heaven. And He did that. We graduated 3 years later debt-free. So when the Lord called me to China, I'm a logical person. I assumed 1 + 1 = 2. He sent me to law school. Then He was sending me to China. I thought He wanted me to practice international law.
Makes sense, right?
It makes sense, but that was not His plan for us at all.
Huh. And so a lot of what you do is working with orphans.
That's correct. The key work that we have in China, the biggest work, is what we call Harmony House. And it's small. Harmony Outreach is a very small ministry, but we take in 20 orphans at any given time. All of these kids have been abandoned because they were born with special needs. And I tell people it's like a game of cards. You're dealt a hand, and the hand that these kids have been dealt is really a bad one. They're born into a developing country with special needs. They were abandoned by their parents, and they'll face a life growing up in a state institution. And so what we do, you sort of reference God's heart for the vulnerable. James 1:27 says, "Pure religion in the sight of God is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unspotted by the world." So we try to step into the shoes of their missing parents and take those terrible cards they've been dealt and put some aces in them. Mm-hmm. And the way we do that is through our 3 Steps to Hope program. Step 1 is foster care at Harmony House. Step 2 is surgery to fix or mitigate their problems. And Step 3 is adoption.
A lot of people, a lot of Americans are looking to China to actually do adoptions. I've got a friend who has done that. How does that play into this? I mean, are you facilitating Western adoptions, or how are you working with that?
Well, we're not an adoption agency, although we've dealt with many over the years because of the work that we're doing. Our kids, most of them that are adopted go to the United States, but they have gone to Canada, They have many of them to China, to Europe, so they can go all over the place. And we really have no control over that aspect of it. Although sometimes, we can try to match people to a child. Some years ago, Stephen Curtis Chapman and Mary Beth Chapman adopted this darling little girl who there's been a lot of discussion about recently, named Maria.
One of the other things you mentioned that you do in your ministry is work with a seminary, and I think a lot of people are surprised even if you say China and seminary at the same time. That might be a little bit of a surprise. Tell me, what's that like?
Well, it's an underground seminary because, as you probably know, in China the government tries to regulate the church, what's called the Three Self-Patriotic Movement. A lot of pastors have rejected that, and so they're forced into an underground status. The seminary that we support is part of the B2J movement, Back to Jerusalem. You may be familiar with that. But I was just out there a few weeks ago, and it's just like the days of the Roman Empire, this cat and mouse game with the government. When I went to the seminary, the car stops, and I can't get out of the car until people jump out of both sides and signal all clear, and then I got to rush into the compound. I have to be hidden when I leave. The first time that I visited the seminary, 2.5 hours after I left, the police raided the compound. And so it's since been relocated to another location.
What is the training like there then? I mean, who's doing the teaching?
I can't speak for all seminaries, only the one that we're working with. But it really is like something out of the Bible, something out of the book of Acts. It's usually young people, late teens, early 20s, really fired up. Most of them will go to Western China, to the Muslim areas, to the extremely poor areas. Again, part of the Back to Jerusalem, so they're trying to take the gospel from the east to the west to go back to Jerusalem. And they live on 40 cents a day. They wake up, singing praise songs, and the conditions by my standards as an American are very Spartan.
You talk a little bit about the underground seminary or the underground church. There are varying reports out of China as to how much freedom there is. It depends on who you talk to. What's your sense of being someone who lives there?
Yes. Well, the difference between China and the United States is that the United States is one country, and although there's 50 states, the law is pretty much uniform. And the Constitution and other things make sure that it's pretty much uniform. In China, it's not so. In China, what happens with the church can vary dramatically, province to province or official to official. And so sometimes you can have a great relationship with a certain arm of the government, and then that leader will retire and the person that replaces him, it could be very different. And so what you have is very uneven. Certain parts of the country, the crackdown can be quite severe. Other areas can be fairly liberal, but then again, that can switch around.
Fascinating look into China and a ministry known as Harmony Outreach. Let me encourage you to learn more about what John does with this ministry, and we'll do that. We'll link you to their website when you visit primetimeamerica.org. Just do that and then click on this part of our program, and we'll give you a link with their website. John is a co-founder of Harmony Outreach. John, thank you. It's great to get to know you.
Thank you, brother.